Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the Book of Ezekiel in our continuing survey of the Old Testament. Looking at our timeline, notice that we have the fall of Nineveh taking place in 612 BC. Um, that will be Nebuchadnezzar coming on the scene, and he defeats the Assyrian Empire by the time we get to Ezekiel's day. And let's put Ezekiel on our chart. Notice he's at the time of the fall of Jerusalem, but actually when Nebuchadnezzar takes Jerusalem in the days of Jehoiachin. Jehoiakim had died. Jehoiachin, his son, only reigns for about 100 days or so. And Nebuchadnezzar captures him and takes both him and Ezekiel, as well as 10,000 of the artisans and craftsmen and things like that from Jerusalem, takes them to Mesopotamia for the Babylonian captivity. Now, they're not taken to the city of Babylon, but they are taken to Mesopotamia. And Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. Hadn't happened yet at this point. Ezekiel's going to prophesy of it, and he will prophesy after it's already taken place. And that destruction will be 586 BC. Now, if your textbook says 587, that's okay. I'm not going to quibble about the exact year. Remember that their years did not start when ours did, but that's okay. 586, 587 BC, around that time. So Ezekiel's book then is going to be divided into three sections. Chapters 1 through 24 will be oracles against Judah. This is why Jerusalem is being carried off into captivity, why they've already been carried off. Remember that we discussed this when we were looking at Jeremiah, that there were actually three different deportations, one in the days of Daniel, one in the days of Ezekiel, one a bit later with the fall of, with the destruction of the temple and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. That's all prophesied in these oracles against Judah. Then we have chapters 25 through 32, oracles against the nations, and the rest of the book is going to be oracles of salvation, which at the end, the last section, chapters 40 through 48, will be a picture of a restored Israel and a restored temple. And so that'll be part of that, part of those oracles. Now, we begin in chapter 1 with what we refer to as Ezekiel's chariot vision. It's a very bizarre vision. Something like glowing metal is in the midst of the fire. Ezekiel sees this coming from the north. There's four living beings. There are wheels within wheels. Movie director Steven Spielberg used this description from Ezekiel chapter 1 as the inspiration for his movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was a great movie, but I don't think it had anything to do with Ezekiel's vision. I know he meant well, and that's okay to get ideas from the Bible. I think it's wonderful, but I think Ezekiel sees something very different from what Spielberg imagined. First Chronicles chapter 28, verse 18, we have a description of things that are being built for the temple in Jerusalem. And we have described, notice, the altar of incense, refined gold by weight, and gold for the model of the chariot. Well, what's the chariot? Well, he goes on, even the cherubim are these statues of angels that were inside the Holy of Holies, that spread out their wings and covered the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. Notice there was something that was supposed to resemble or represent a chariot in the Holy of Holies, in and around or having to do with the Ark of the Covenant. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. I know we haven't done Daniel yet, but notice I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels, the throne of God had wheels. That's what it says here in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. So this idea of chariot and wheels was something that was associated with the temple, and more specifically with the throne of God, and more specifically with the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies. Now, these four living creatures that are described, they are said to have human form. They have four faces and four wings. Their legs are straight and their feet are like calves' hooves. It's sort of a strange description. And the four forms for the face are described as the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of a bull, and the face of an eagle. Now, what do these four faces have in common? Man, lion, bull, eagle. Well, they're all created things. There's, notice, the human, there's the king of beasts, the lion, the domesticated animal, the bull, and the flying animal, the eagle. So the intelligent one, the one on land, the one that's domesticated, and the one flying in the air sort of describes all sorts of living creatures. It's a representative sampling. Now, the meaning of the vision. First of all, it's telling us that God is the God over all of life, whether wild animals or domesticated animals or birds or men. Now, we see a similar vision when we get to chapter 10 in Ezekiel, where again there's these four living creatures and each one had four faces. But notice here it's different. The first face was the face of a cherub. That's an angel. The second face was the face of a man, the third face, the face of a lion, the fourth, the face of an eagle. So notice we've moved out the bull and we've pulled in the cherub. Again, it's not about the specific animal, it's showing that of all of life, whether it's angelic life or human life or animal life or domesticated life or flying life, it is all under the realm of God. He's the God over all life. That's the point. The wheels then are a picture of the mighty power of God. How do wheels depict power? Well, the most advanced form of weaponry in the world of that day was the chariot, specifically the chariot that had wheels with spokes in it. Now, they'd had these chariots with big solid wheels way back in the third millennia BC, and they went really fast, like not at all. You could probably walk or run faster than those chariots could go. But in more recent times, not so close to Ezekiel's day, but still in the second millennia, a new invention had come out, and it was superb. It was the six-spoked chariot wheel, which horses pulling this, and they used horses instead of just mules or donkeys. Now they were using horses because they were faster. And these chariots could go like, you know, what they would have thought of as speed of light. I mean, it's not from our way of thinking, but it was back then. This was the fastest weaponry. Think nuclear missiles, if we want to get a modern day parallel. And God is in control of those things, and he goes where he wishes. Now, we get to chapter 4 and beginning in verse 1. Now, you, son of man, speaking to Ezekiel, get yourself a brick, place it before you, and inscribe a city on it, Jerusalem. So he's going to get a brick, but the brick represents the city of Jerusalem. It's going to be sort of a scale model. And using this model, verse 2, then lay siege against it, build a siege wall, raise up a ramp, pitch camps, and place battering rams against it all around. So he's doing like a miniature model of the city of Jerusalem. It's just a brick; doesn't have to be built to scale. And he's going to do a little siege around this model of Jerusalem. And as he's doing it, God either is or will be doing the same thing in the actual literal city of Jerusalem. Verse 3, then get yourself an iron plate and set it up as an iron wall between you and the city, and set your face toward it so that it is under siege, and besiege it. This is a sign to the house of Israel. They're being given a sign over here in Mesopotamia. They don't have, the latest television or movie networks or things where they can see what's going on in Jerusalem. So he's going to play it out for them so that they will see what's going on in Jerusalem. Verse 4, as for you, lie down on your left side and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel on it. You shall bear their iniquity for the number of days that you lie on it, for I have assigned you a number of days corresponding to the years of their iniquity, 390 days. That's over a year. Well, and you think he had to do this for 390 days? That's a long time. Well, God says, hey, I had to do it for 390 years. I had to endure the sinfulness of the house of Israel. Thus you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So notice the number of days corresponding to the years of their iniquity. When we get to the book of Daniel in the future, we're going to see Daniel using the same sort of reckoning, giving something with regard to days, or in his case, he'll use weeks. And the weeks will represent weeks, not just of days, but weeks of years. Same idea, but it starts here in Ezekiel chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. We continue to verse 6. When you have continued these, you shall lie down a second time, but on your right side, and bear the iniquity of the house of Judah. The first time was on Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel. Remember, they had been carried into captivity back in 721 BC. Now it's the southern kingdom of Judah. I've assigned it to you for 40 days, a day for each year. So again, days represent years, and 40 days representing 40 years where Judah had been in sin and worshiping other gods and things like that. So notice, again, a day for each year. Next, we see a vision in chapter 8 where Ezekiel sees the glory of the presence of the Lord within his temple. Now, when I say the glory of the Lord, remember how God had given instructions for Moses to build a tabernacle, and they had built it. And when it was completed, they offer a prayer of dedication, and the presence of God, the abiding glory. The way you say that in Hebrew is the Shekinah glory. It just means to abide or to remain, the remaining glory, came there into the tabernacle. Later on, when Solomon built the temple, the same thing happened. Solomon offers a prayer of dedication, and God shows up, and the glory comes into the temple, and God shows up like I've taken residence in my house, in my temple. Well, Ezekiel, in a vision, because he's not in Jerusalem, he's in Mesopotamia, but he sees the glory of the presence of the Lord within his temple. That's where it's supposed to be. A little bit later, as you go on through that chapter and into the next, chapter 9, verse 3, the glory of God is seen at the doorway to the temple. Instead of being in the Holy of Holies, it's gone out to the doorway. Next, you go into the following chapter, chapter 10, verse 18, it leaves the doorway and moves out to the eastern gate. What's happening? God is leaving the building because of their sinfulness, because of their rejection of him, because of this is a judgment. God judges by leaving the temple. And finally, we see it moving completely out of the city of Jerusalem, chapter 11, verse 23. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood over the mountain which is east of the city. What mountain is east of the city of Jerusalem? That's the Mount of Olives. Reminds me a little bit of how David, remember David had to leave Jerusalem because Absalom had formulated a revolt against him, and he leaves the city, and he goes across the Kidron Valley to the east, and he goes up to the top of the Mount of Olives, and he weeps over the city. And it reminded us of how Jesus came to the temple back in his day, and he presented himself, and he was rejected, and he goes out of the temple, and he goes across the Kidron Valley, and he goes to the top of the Mount of Olives, and he weeps over the city. He says, Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you, like a hen gathers her chicks. Well, here we see the Spirit of God doing the same thing. The Spirit of God goes and resides over the mountain, which is east of the city. He's left the building. Now, we have chapters 1 through 24, then, oracles against Judah. And it started, we saw Ezekiel's call. There is a message of judgment. There is the temple that we just looked at. Next, there's more judgment. There are various pictures and illustrations. There is more judgment. Do you see a common theme? The theme of judgment. There's more pictures. And then chapters 25 through 32, we have oracles against the nations. And these nations, notice they're listed. Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, Egypt, all the surrounding nations. Now, you say, what about Babylon? Babylon's not mentioned here because Babylon's the one doing the judgment. Babylon is God's tool to bring the oracles against these nations. And Babylon's going to take each one of them out and spank each one of them. One of those nations with which I've always been fascinated is the prophecy against Tyre, chapter 26 and beginning of verse 1. Now in the 11th year, on the first of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, because Tyre has said concerning Jerusalem, Aha, the gateway of the peoples is broken, it is open to me, I shall be filled. Behold, now that she is laid waste. Notice what's happened. Jerusalem is being attacked by Nebuchadnezzar, and the people of Tyre, instead of saying, oh, gee, maybe we could help them out, or maybe we could at least bring in some refugees, they're saying, look at Jerusalem being overturned. Let's go get some free slaves. Let's go take advantage of their misfortune. Verse 3, therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Tyre, and I will bring up many nations against you. Nebuchadnezzar is coming against Jerusalem, but many nations are going to come up against Tyre as the sea brings up its waves. Now, the sea brings its waves not all at once, but a wave comes and then another wave and then another wave, and there's a pause in between, but that's how the waves come. The city of Tyre, as I said, was located to the north of Canaan, the north of Israel. It was right on the coast. Indeed, this city was a naval power back in that day. Now, the Jews were never a naval power. The Jews were mostly landlubbers, but the Phoenicians, and Tyre was a Phoenician city. The Phoenicians are people. They're a Canaanite subgroup. And the Phoenicians in general, and the city of Tyre in specific, they formed colonies all over the Mediterranean. Could go as far as Spain, and notice Carthage in North Africa. These are all Phoenician colonies. The major islands like Sicily and Sardinia and Corsica, Crete. These had all been places that were now colonized by the Phoenicians, and they were the big naval power of that day. Verse 4, they will destroy the walls. Now, this isn't the Phoenicians. This is Tyre being destroyed. Notice it doesn't say yet who they are. They will destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers, and I will scrape her debris from her and make her a bare rock. Now, normally when a city is destroyed, it doesn't become a bare rock. Normally it becomes a bunch of rubble. But here notice I'm going to scrape the rubble. I'm going to scrape the debris from her and make her a bare rock. Verse 5, she will be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be any people there because somebody's got to spread the nets, but it's going to be a fishing place instead of a big giant city that has all these big naval power. She will be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for I have spoken, declares the Lord God, and she will become spoil for the nations. Verse 7, for thus says the Lord God, behold, I will bring upon Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is going to be the first of those waves. He's king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, chariots, cavalry, and a great army. Who's that? That's Nebuchadnezzar. He will slay your daughters on the mainland with a sword, and he will make a siege walls against you, and cast up a ramp against you, and raise up a large shield against you. He's going to do those things. We continue into verse 10. The blow of his battering rams he will direct against your walls, and with his axes he will break down your towers. Because of the multitude of his horses, the dust raised by them will cover you. Your walls will shake at the noise of cavalry and wagons and chariots when he enters your gates as men enter a city that is breached. That's going to happen with Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to come, and he's going to break through your city. But notice verse 12, you get down to verse 12, and it says, also, they will make. You say, what happened to he? Suddenly there's a change. Now, I'm not sure that would be significant, except that I happen to know about the subsequent history of the city of Tyre. And I say, well, maybe it is significant. Also, they will make a spoil of your riches and a prey of your merchandise, break down your walls and destroy your pleasant houses, and throw your stones and your timbers and your debris into the water. Now, that almost sounds like figurative language, and I would tend to think, okay, that you're not going to literally throw the debris and things into the water. But then when they do that in history, you say, whoa, gee, this is more literal than I expected it to be. Now, what happened is Nebuchadnezzar, sure enough, he had conquered the city of Tyre, but the city of Tyre was a little bit like Miami. And if you go to Miami, there's a section of Miami, and then there's a section called Miami Beach. And part of Miami Beach is, instead of being on the coast right next to Miami, it's on an island off the coast. And the city of Tyre was like that. It was an island off the coast, and Nebuchadnezzar captured the island city. Captured the mainland city, destroyed the walls, just like the prophecy said, but he never captured the island. That was off the coast, and he didn't have a navy, and they had ships, and he didn't. And so it remained there for the next, 150 years or so, until Alexander the Great came along, and he was marching from Macedon in the north, and he came down to the city of Tyre. And every city that he came to, he said, open your gates and surrender to me, and if you do, whoever is your king, you're now a governor under me, pay me your taxes, and have a nice day. And most of the cities did that. But he came to Tyre, and Tyre said, no, you can't come here. And as we said, the mainland city of Tyre had been destroyed by Babylon. There's a close-up of what that looked like along the way. But off the coast, about half a mile off the coast, was the island city of Tyre. It actually had two harbors, and the people were there. There were still people in the mainland, but it didn't have the big city walls that it had at one time. And the people on the island would not surrender. And Alexander said, well, we'll see about that. And he proceeded to build a causeway, and not a bridge. A bridge goes over the water. A causeway goes in the water. And you start off right on the shore. It's not very deep, but the further you go out, that got to be fairly deep. And so he needed a lot of building materials. What did he use for building materials? He used every stone, every brick, every house, every piece of wall from the mainland that all went into the water. That prophecy of Ezekiel was literally fulfilled as he made this causeway all the way to the island. It took him 6 months. And after 6 months, he had finally gathered a few ships, but he marched across and captured the island city of Tyre. And its inhabitants were sold into slavery. And if you go there today, over the last 2,000 plus years, that causeway is still there, but the waves and stuff have gradually built up a sandbar on either side of it. In fact, now it's more than sandbar. Now it's solid land. So that it has turned into, in the last 2,000 years, it's turned into a peninsula that reaches all the way out to the island and makes that. And if you go out to the end, there's a fishing village there, a place for the spreading of nets, just as the prophet said. You say, well, I've looked on the map. There's the city of Tyre, but the modern day city of Tyre is a few miles, about 4 miles to the south of the island city. So 7-month siege, fall of Tyre took place in July 29th, 332 BC, and this prophecy was vividly fulfilled. So let's look again at that prophecy. Many nations will come against Tyre. It wasn't just Babylon. It wasn't just Nebuchadnezzar. There would be others as well. And later on, other nations got into the act as well. Her walls and towers would be broken down. The debris of the city would be removed. Nebuchadnezzar will attack. We have the stones and the timbers thrown into the water. Like I said, I would have thought maybe that was figurative, but it wasn't. It was actually literal. And Tyre would be a bare rock and a place for the spreading of nets, which even to this day, it's still a place for the spreading of nets. It's one of the prophecies is the city would not be rebuilt. As I said, there's a city of Tyre to the south a bit, but this city is not the city of Tyre. Chapter 28, verse 11. Now we come to a new topic. And notice that Tyre is still referenced here. But notice again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation over the king of Tyre. Now, previously we had talked about the prince of Tyre, but now we read of the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord God, you had the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. And you say, wait a minute, when was the king of Tyre ever in Eden? I thought that Eden was like back in Genesis. That was at creation. That was all, at the beginning of all of history. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The ruby, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, lapis lazuli, the turquoise, and the emerald, and the gold. The workmanship of your settings and sockets was in you. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. Now, I don't know about you. I was born. And people have been born, but if I want to find someone who has been created, I have to go back to Eden. I have to go back to the Garden of Eden. I have to look at Adam and Eve, and I suppose angels were also created. And so exactly who is being described here? Verse 14, you were the anointed cherub who covers. This sounds like it's being spoken to an angel. A cherub is a mighty angel. Now, I know sometimes we'll talk about, you'll hear people talk about a cherub. First of all, the word here isn't a CH sound, it's a K sound. That's why I call it a cherub. And you'll talk about, people talk about cherubs and these fat little baby angels. That's not the picture of a cherub. Cherub is this mighty angel The wings might be there. In fact, they were on the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. You had these statues of two cherubim. The eem is plural, so there were two cherubim, one cherub. Two cherubim with their wings stretched out over the ark and looking to the center, and they represented the honor guard for the presence of God. Well, notice you were the anointed cherub who covers, and I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. It continues, you were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. By the abundance of your trade, you were internally filled with violence, and you sinned. Therefore, I have cast you as profane from the mountain of God, and I have destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. To whom does this individual involve? Who is this mysterious king of Tyre? Who is this covering cherub? Well, many people have thought, and I used to think too, and maybe this is accurate, I want to be careful here, that it was a picture of Satan, who was the real power behind the throne of the king of Tyre. That's the idea here. Um, there's earlier references to the prince or leader of Tyre. He was in Eden. I notice it refers to the day he was created. He is the anointed or covering cherub. To cover, you say, that is anointed. That's that idea. The anointed cherub who covers. I guess you could actually call that the messianic cherub that covers. Originally full of wisdom and beauty, and then he was cast down. And that sounds like what I imagine, rightly or wrongly, what we might think of as the Satan, the enemy. Remember, the word Satan in the Old Testament is always a title. It was not the name. When I get to the New Testament, it uses a name. So is this Satan? Or is this a figurative way? And I want to be careful here. Is this a figurative way to describe the king of Tyre? After all, it says he's the king of Tyre. So I'm not going too far out on a limb to just take those words at face value. Ezekiel has already described Israel as having been created back in chapter 21, verse 30. You say, well, Israel was born. Israel was the name of Jacob, but the nation was created, and so it works there. The king of Egypt is described by Ezekiel as being like one of the trees of Eden. Now, we don't take that literally, and of course we shouldn't, because it's a simile. It says doesn't say he was one of the trees. It says he is like one of the trees, although you could have done it as a metaphor, and that would have worked as well. So is this the king of Tyre? Now, the past king of Tyre, way back when the temple was being built, he had helped the building of Solomon's temple. He had supplied building supplies. He had big cedars of Lebanon floated down by ship, because it was the Phoenicians that had the ships. The Israelites didn't have those, and so he helped to build Solomon's temple, which was a place that represented Eden. That part is true. So is this just a very ornate way, a very figurative way, a very vivid way of describing the king of Tyre? And if this is the case, then the king of Tyre is now likened to one of those cherubim that we're seeing in Eden, except that now he has fallen. He's not helping build the temple. He's actually helping loot the temple nowadays. So is this Satan? Is this a picture of Hiram or descendants? Remember, Hiram had been the king of Tyre. Is this a picture of Hiram or a later king of Tyre? Is this a picture of Adam, mankind? Or maybe a bit of all of the above? And I'm going to leave that as a question mark, because I'm not sure. We see next a prophecy of Israel's regathering. And remember, when I say Israel's regathering, in the days of Ezekiel, Israel had been scattered. The northern kingdom had been taken into captivity in 721 BC. Southern kingdom had been taken to Mesopotamia, Babylon, and other places in Mesopotamia. And so Ezekiel is going to prophesy how that nation that is scattered in his day would eventually be brought back. By the way, that was fulfilled in part, just like you had successive deportations. You also have successive returns. in the days of Zerubbabel, and also in the days of Ezra, in the days of Nehemiah. This prophecy is given in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 22. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I'm about to act, but for my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations where you went. For I will take you from the nations, where I sent you there, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Talking about a restoration. Verse 25, then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I'm going to change you, but I'm going to change you from the inside out. I'm going to do something inside, which will clean you in a permanent way. Verse 27, I will put my spirit within you. So first he cleans, but also the presence of his spirit. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. You will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers. So you will be my people, and I will be your God. So a picture of a return, but a return with the Holy Spirit and a return with them having been cleansed and repenting. Now we get to the next chapter, chapter 37. And we have the same sort of promise given, but here it's in a very graphic, visual sort of method, where Ezekiel has this vision of a valley that is full of bones, and they're dry bones. And these aren't bodies that are freshly dead. They are dead and not buried, but dead and out in the open and all dry, and it just looks terrible. Chapter 37, verse 1, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones. Like I said, this is a vision. This is he's seeing this, but, and he's going through it, but this we're not to take this literally. There's not somewhere where there's going to be a valley of dry bones in the future. It's a picture of Israel. Verse 2, he caused me to pass among them round about, and behold, there were very many on the surface of the valley, and lo, they were very dry. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is perished. We are completely cut off. That's a picture of what Israel was like. It was no longer a vibrant nation. It wasn't even dead and buried. It was just like dead and scattered. Verse 12, therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says the Lord God, behold, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. We're not talking about a literal physical resurrection, I don't think, although that happens too. But here we're looking at a resurrection of the nation. And then being brought back into the land of Israel. Now remember, we're going to see that happen in the days of Zerubbabel, a bit after Ezekiel. So we know from our vantage point there's a fulfillment, and yet the fulfillment doesn't quite seem complete, because remember, the promise would be that the Spirit would happen there, and the Spirit didn't. It wasn't given at that time. That happened later on. That happened in Acts chapter 2. So that was, in a sense, a different, can I call it a different resurrection? Again, not a physical resurrection, but a different coming to life of the nation of Israel. We get down to verse 13. Then you will know that I am the Lord when I have opened your graves and caused you to come out of your graves, my people. I will put my spirit within you. Here it is again about the Spirit. I will put my spirit within you, and you will come to life, and I will place you on your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken and done it, declares the Lord. So we are to look at this, and of course we can see the fulfillment. Doesn't look like maybe the way we might have imagined it, but I see the fulfillment, where Israel came to spiritual life in the days of Acts chapter 2, as the message came forth, and a remnant heard and believed and were filled with the Spirit. So we see both prophecy, promise, and we see in the New Testament fulfillment. Now, We have chapter 33 through, and we're right in the middle of this section because we were just looking at chapters 33, 36, and 37. These are oracles of salvation. So we have the picture of a watchman waiting for God to bring about his salvation. We have this promise of restoration. We just saw part of that in chapters 36 and 37. Next, there is a series of prophecies, chapters 38 and 39, of something called Gog and Magog. Now, the word Magog, when you put a may in front of something, that's having to do with Gog. So it's Gog and having to do with Gog. But Magog had actually been one of those nations that had been mentioned way back in Genesis chapter 10. If you ask Jewish people, where was Magog? They would have told you, and they did. If you read Josephus, his comment on it, he says Magog is what they called the Scythians. These are a people that had learned to ride horses back before anybody was using horses to ride on. And they lived to the north of the Black Sea, the north and around the areas of the Black Sea. And occasionally they came south and created a ruckus. And in that prophecy, they're coming south along with other folk, and they're creating a ruckus. And it's an invasion that is being described there. After that is over, and God, by the way, God comes in and rescues his people in that prophecy. And then we get to chapters 40 through 48, and we have a picture of a new temple. Now, in that picture of a new temple, I want to show you a comparison. We'll close on this note of Ezekiel's vision of a temple within the city versus John's book of Revelation, chapters 21 and 22, where there is a New Jerusalem described coming down from heaven. In Ezekiel's vision, Ezekiel's taken in this vision to a very high mountain. In the book of Revelation, John is carried in the spirit to a great and high mountain. They start off the same. In Ezekiel's vision, a man uses a rod to measure the dimensions of the temple. In John's book of Revelation, an angel measures the city with a rod. In Ezekiel's vision, the entire temple area is a perfect square. In John's Revelation, the entire city is described in terms of a perfect, not a square, but a cube, where its length and its width and its height are all the same. What are the dimensions? 12,000 stadia. Now, my translation, New American Standard, says that's 1,600 miles. And that's okay, that's accurate, but I think it misses the symbolism. You're supposed to hear 12,000 because 12 is a big number, both in the book of Revelation and throughout the rest of the Hebrew scriptures. But 12,000, that's a big number, that's a major number, but a whole lot. And so this is a giant city and a perfect cube. Where have I seen that dimension? Where have I seen something that was a perfect cube? It was the Holy of Holies, both in the tabernacle and again in Solomon's temple. The Holy of Holies, its length, its width, and its height were all equal to each other. It was a perfect cube, but in the book of Revelation, the entire city is the Holy of Holies. Now, in Ezekiel's vision, we have the presence of the glory of the Lord. It enters the temple in the same way it had left the temple in chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now it comes back, and God re-enters his temple, his new temple. In the book of Revelation, we read that there's no need of the sun or moon because the Lord illumines the city. So he's there. It's the entire city as Holy of Holies. In Ezekiel's vision, there's no foreigner who is admitted into the temple. In the book of Revelation, we read that nothing unclean and no unbeliever is allowed into the city. In Ezekiel's vision, a river of water flows out of the temple. In the book of Revelation, we read that a river of the water of life flows from the throne of God. In Ezekiel's vision, we see that there are a total of 12 gates around the city. In the book of Revelation, there is 12 gates to the city. In Ezekiel's vision, the name of the city shall be The Lord is There, and we read about the book of Revelation where the throne of God shall be there. Ezekiel chapter 43 and verse 4, we read, the glory of the Lord came into the house by the way of the gate facing toward the east. Remember how it went out? Went out by the eastern gate and then went out to the east to the Mount of Olives. Here it comes back the same way, verse 5. And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house. God has returned to his building. You say, what's the building? What's the building? Well, Jesus said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. He is the building. and And he is making a building. We see this in the New Testament. And we are the building. We're the building blocks. He's the foundation. And we are this new temple.